Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Dan Miller. Dan is the author of the book, 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love. He's got a whole business beyond that and got a really interesting story. He's got multiple books published, including No More Dreaded Mondays and Wisdom Meets Passion, super passionate about helping people find work that they love. And so just an amazing person, an amazing business, and amazing books. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is kind of go behind the scenes on that. And this is really cool. Is that he's got a cool story about buying back the rights or actually getting back the rights. We'll go into that story in just a little bit. As part of that, I think people will find that interesting. Dan, great to have you here.
Thanks. Hey, great to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
So, hey, let's go back to the start. Why write the book originally? I think now it's, we'll get into this later, the 20th anniversary edition of the book. And I think it slightly changed titles, but the 48 Days to the Work You Love. Why write that book originally? What sparked that?
It was a different story because I never saw myself as a writer. That's not what I was leaning toward. I didn't decide I need to write a book. It came out of leading a Sunday school class. My wife and I agreed to teach a Sunday school class in our church on career life transition. Well, my background academically is in clinical psychology, so it was a comfortable area for me. I was doing other things business-wise. It was just serving my church and community. And I anticipated that Sunday school class, Chandler, having, the 20-year-old who just lost his job at Burger King, show up. And I had a few of those, but what surprised me, I had dentists and attorneys and physicians and pastors and engineers and accountants. I'm like, what are you guys doing here? I'm like, well, we're doing okay. Everybody sees us doing okay, and we are, but I don't think this is it. I think there's something more. And it opened me up to that space where people are doing okay economically, but they think, this is not my heart's passion. This is not my dream. This is just something that's okay. And it allowed me to go deep with those people. And then in doing that and just developing content to kind of walk us all through that, I immediately had people saying, I want my son-in-law to hear what you just talked to us about. What do you have I can give him? I didn't have anything. And the requests kept coming. And as I know you've heard you talk about it, enough people ask you the right question, you create a product to solve it for them. Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. I put together just a rough compilation of my notes in a 3-ring binder, put 2 cassettes on the inside cover of that baby, and we started making that available, and it just took off. That was the first form of what became then 48 Days to the Work You Love.
That's great. And working with people, helping people solve problems, and then using the book to be able to solve those problems on a bigger scale. It's honestly, it sounds very similar to, I just did a podcast interview with Gary Chapman of the 5 Love Languages. He said the same exact thing, right? Is asking and going through all these sessions through counseling, things bubble up, and then people say, hey, how can I share this with other people? You write the book, it solves the problem, and you're able to help people on a larger scale.
And thus the content did not come from me sitting in a cubicle or going away to a cabin for 6 months. It came just out of the real life interaction with people. So the stories in there are real. They're not just anecdotal. They're real stories about what people went through to find their passion, find work that mattered and was purposeful and profitable. And so it really resonated with people, and it just took off pretty quickly.
Because your audience, who you're writing to. So you wrote it out of the need. Did you just put it out there and start selling it? Did you say, hey, I'm going to go get a publishing deal and then publish it? Like, how did you navigate that whole process?
I never talked to a publisher. I never went to a library, a bookstore. I just put it together in a way that seemed to be expedient, that being a 3-ring binder, and started selling that. Well, there were some things that happened right during that period of time. My buddy Dave Ramsey had just started his radio show, and he had these calls from somebody who's making $42,000 and wanted a wife to be a stay-at-home mom. How can I get wealth? And he says, you need to figure out how to make more money. You need to get my buddy Dan Miller's material. So we started just an agreement where he would promote it. We would man the phones while he was on the air, and we'd get these calls after calls after calls. Gee, I just heard Dave Ramsey talk about you. And we'd send out that 3-ring binder. And there was a time. Now this is interesting too, how we did that, because I didn't have a budget for advertising. Dave didn't have advertisers standing in line for a show that very few people had heard about. So we just had a handshake agreement. I was selling that 3-ring binder for $39. And I told Dave, I'm interested in building my list because I can sell these people other things if they get exposed to my content. So I agreed to give him $25 out of that 39. My cost was $7. So it was essentially a break even, but we were at one point adding about 1,000 people a week to my list just because of Dave Ramsey listeners. We also got to a point with that agreement where I was sending him checks for $18,000, $20,000 a month. Both of us just new entrepreneurs. I was building my list like crazy, and I was his first advertiser. It was just a great agreement all the way around.
That's amazing. And it's funny how similar your guys' stories are too, right? Of how you
Yeah.
kind of got into it
Well,
to what you're into.
and then I heard this guy, I've always been a voracious reader of the Masters of Achievement. So the old greats, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, Dennis Waitley, Norman Vincent Peale, those guys. And so this guy, Mark Victor Hansen, said he's going to do Mega Book University in Los Angeles and share it with people how he sold books, him being the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. So I said, talked to my wife. I said, hey, I want to go to this. If I'm selling this thing and it seems to be working okay, I want to really figure out how to do it better. She said, okay. So I tapped my buddy Dave Ramsey on the shoulder. I said, hey, let's go to this thing. So Sharon and Dave went with us to that. We sat there for three days and listened to this guy talk about how he sold Chicken Soup for the Soul and how you just nurture your audience, the relationships you have. I came back, and in the next 18 months, I sold over $2 million worth of that 3-ring binder that I was selling. But holy smokes, this works. So then I'd never talked to a publisher. I never reached out to a publisher ever. Then I had publishers knocking on my door. They said, we see what you're doing with this crazy 3-ring binder. How about if we produce a traditional trade book with that? So I did a deal with a publisher, got my first little advance, and we went to that. Now, here's what happened though, and this relates to how you handle your books. So I was bringing in at $39 a piece. And at that point, I was selling a lot outside of my Dave Ramsey connections, obviously. And we had $7 in that. So it was very, very profitable. Then I got a book deal. I got $15,000 advance for my first book deal. And then I would get royalties on a book, and I got about $1.50 per book. So my revenue per book sale dropped precipitously, but my audience exploded because they had distribution that I didn't have. So all of a sudden I was hearing from people, not only in Tennessee, Georgia and Kentucky, but geez, people in Norway and Sweden and all over the world. So it was that trade-off. It reduced my profits. And I know we'll talk about the trade-off there, but it increased the distribution and created kind of a worldwide audience for us.
That's wild. I got so many follow-up questions to that.
I just had Mark and Victor Hansen, or Mark and Crystal Hansen back on just a couple of weeks ago on my podcast, kind of replaying the events that happened there.
Yeah.
And it just phenomenal. Then I went back on stage with Mark Victor Hansen at a subsequent event of his and told how I got that first book deal, how the success of that book then led to the next bidding war for No More Dreaded Mondays, and how that has evolved into other things.
Yeah. So, hey, walk me through, you said 2 million in copies in 18 months after that conference.
In revenue.
Or sorry, 2 million in revenue from copies sold over 18 months. After that, what you said, obviously there was still the Dave connection and book sales through there. Besides that, what else did you do during that 18 months to sell so many copies of that book, even before you got the publishing deal?
One of the things, knowing my audience, we wanted connection with the audience, not just a one-time transaction. We wanted connection with them. And so I was building a really robust list that I promised them I would send them every Friday career tips. So we were doing a newsletter. I started that newsletter. I sent it out to the 67 people whose email addresses I had. 67 people. That was in August of 2000. So I said, if you enjoy it, share it with your friends. If you don't, we'll take you off the list. Just let me know. Well, we've had over 140,000 people sign up for that free newsletter. So the book sales prompted that. In my books, as you do as well, I have a lot of incentives in there for them to go to my website. So the book is just the tip of the iceberg to then engage with people. So seeing that and seeing people that wanted more, then I started offering personal coaching on careers. We started doing live events on how to do that, how to get in the game. We developed a seminar series on the back end. So all those things we developed on the back end of the book just being the lead to get us those contacts.
That's great. And so you did that. So it sounds like a newsletter was a big part of it, of the book sales, even before the book deal. What about post book deal? I mean, I know that's when the book hit New York Times. Like, what did you guys do to promote the book post book launch, and what worked the best?
We've always done things that are pretty organic. We embrace the relationships with people who already know about us. They're our biggest fans. They're our biggest marketing team. So I don't do a lot of, I've never done billboards, that kind of traditional advertising. And one of the things that came along in that period of time that we're talking about here too was an opportunity to be on terrestrial radio there in Nashville. So I was on the same station as Rush Limbaugh, Dave Ramsey. Well, that was pretty powerful. So that really led things. For 6 years, I was on radio. And the reason I changed from that is because I had some kid came along and said, there's this thing called podcasting. He said, why don't you let me take segments of your radio show? We'll put it up this thing called podcast. I say, hey, whatever, do whatever, just have fun with it. And wow, I thought I had a big audience with the radio show. We were a 100,000 watt station out of Nashville, Tennessee. But then with the podcast, then I started hearing from people from New Zealand and Bangladesh and Australia and places I never heard of. I thought, you got to be kidding me. So I told the radio station, I'm going to finish my contract and then that's it. They're like, you're crazy. This podcast is a fad. Radio's the real deal. I says, nah, man, I've seen the light. And I did that. They thought I was absolutely crazy because I had a really successful radio show. I finished that, went to podcasting, and podcasting has just exploded. I've never seen a marketing tool that has more responsiveness, more intimacy, more loyalty than podcasting. So I started that in December of '06. I've never missed a week. That's another thing. You build trust with consistency. I've never missed a week. I've never done a replay. So I'm approaching now 15 years of run of that. And so that's been a really powerful thing. But those are things that are not just paid for advertising. It's nurturing relationships, giving content to people that they really can use, giving a ton of free content, and it fuels the back end sales of products that do
Mm.
create money.
That's great. And so, taking a adding value first approach, and through
Yes.
content, through the podcast, through the newsletter, through all those things, and by focusing on that, that's really built momentum, and building momentum both from an overall listenership and audience perspective, but it sounds like also building momentum into things like this book launch and the launch of future books, paid products, the coaching programs, kind of everything on the back end.
I've got a book that'll be coming out very soon. Well, the first thing I'll do is send out autographed, specially packaged copies to about 300 people. And there's a pregnant pause there for a reason, because that's the essence of my marketing plan. It's getting that in the hands of people that I've developed relationships with. They're the biggest promoters. I mean, to try to go out here and find somebody who never heard of me, yesterday, man, that's tough. But just nurturing relationships that I developed over these years just means that I can just open my hand with a new product. It's the old, Napoleon Hill principle, how to think and grow rich. Wow, you build those relationships. When you talk about people like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, and J.D. Rockefeller and all that, it was the relationships they built that made them extremely successful. And we have the same opportunity to do that today. And I find a lot of people, they're going after people. It's kind of at the bottom of the pyramid, so to speak. People never heard of them before, and they're doing all these things. And I won't drop any names. No offense to anybody doing whatever they're doing. I go deep with people who are already my fans, and I know what happens. They spread the word. with more effectiveness and credibility than I could ever do myself showing up where I've never been heard of before. So we really focus on that.
And any practical tips for folks specific to that? Like, so if I'm listening to this right now, I'm thinking, okay, I get it, Dan, this is great. Like, how do I go deep and be intentional about going deeper with the people who already know about me and who are already in my ecosystem? Or how do you approach that?
I'm pretty accessible. People comment on that a lot. And yes, I am, to people that I already know. So, I mean, sure, I get auto random inquiries and I can't respond to all of those, but I don't want to forget the people who helped me get to where I am. So I still remember, the guys who are struggling, who did just lose their job at Burger King and are trying to figure that out, or the little gal who was a dental hygienist making $17,000 a year. Today, she's manager for one of the big dental conglomerates. She opens their new offices, makes about 200,000 a year. She credits that to sitting in that little Sunday school class that I had. I still want to be in touch with her. I want to hear those updated stories. So, and that's what I focus on. That's what gets my time.
That's great. Dan, you mentioned getting the rights back to your book. So obviously you get the advance, you publish the book and all those things. You hit New York Times, it sells for years and years and years. How'd you do that? What's the story there?
Oh my gosh. This is an amazing story. And but it's, 48 Days to the Work You Love. Boom, came out, did really well. New York Times bestseller and has done extremely well. Well, being a book where the content, the application changes. The Work You Love 20 years ago, we didn't have digital nomads, electronic immigrants, and all the kind of terminology that we use today to describe real work opportunities. Look at what's happened in the last year and how work models have changed, just hammered the old traditional work model. So about 30% of the content that was in that book 20 years ago is still there. The core message, figure out how God has uniquely gifted you, and then how to create from that a focus so that you can identify and move into work that is purposeful, fulfilling, and profitable. 70% has changed because the work models have changed so dramatically. How we do interviews have changed. What if you want to be involved in a philanthropic kind of organization? The approach is totally different than just getting a resume out there and doing a job search. So I've updated it every 5 years. So I updated it 05, 10, 15, and then 20. So it came time for the 2020 update. I approached my publisher. I said, what's coming. We need to update this. They were like, well, I'm not sure this book really fits in line with what we're doing as a publisher. Now, as a publisher, they went from doing 300 to 400 titles a year to doing 35. It's one of the Christian publishers. They're very focused in what they're doing. And I said, I think you're right. It doesn't really fit in your new focus. That was the main thing. And so I said, in light of that, I'd like to request rights back. And I said, okay, let us think about it. We'll come up with a proposal, whatever. So 4 months went by. I kept checking in. Gee, what do you think? And I'd already been calculating, what would I be willing to do? How big would I be willing to write that check? Because this is a big deal. This is a book that is doing really well still. What would I be willing to do to get that back? Now, in the period of time, all those years of being with the publisher, their personnel changed over and over again, like it does. And there were things that they did that I just thought were absolutely ludicrous. I just wanted to hit myself in the head. Are you kidding me? But I always valued the relationship. I always treated the relationship with respect and generosity. 4 months later, the publisher came back. She says, Dan, we've looked at this. There's no precedent for this. We have no legal right to give you this back at all. But in light of the relationship you've had with us over all these years, we're going to give you the book back. That was it. She said, what we require is that you buy what we have in inventory. I said, okay. I said, don't print anything more. I said, here's the timing. So I laid out a 6-month timeline in which I could have the new version ready to go and in the marketplace because I didn't want a gap where there was nothing available. So I went to work on getting the new version all ready to go. And then I said, okay, now I'm ready. And in the meantime, they had continued to diminish their inventory, which worked to my advantage even more. At the end of the day, I paid $1,800 for what little bit of inventory they had left
Oh
and
my
got
goodness.
total rights back.
Wow.
I've talked to other friends of mine who, having had a book that was successful, tried to buy back the rights. We're $250,000, $500,000. What would it take? What would it take? Those kind of. I got this back, and again, I'm humbled by that. But it was because of how I treated the relationship. Had I been a jerk in any part of that over all those years, that would have never happened. And I mean,
Wow.
I'm just so thankful for that. But that gave me then, instead of that tiny royalty, now I'm totally in the driver's seat. Now I did, new audio. We can segment out portions of it any way that we want to. We can parcel that out. So it's a game changer. Now I still
Mm.
did partner with publisher where the arrangement is much, much different, but where I'm in total control of that. And I still have access to the distribution that the publisher can bring, getting us in bookstores, schools, universities, airports. That would be difficult for me to do. So it's, as you understand all the different models so well, I didn't just pull it all into myself and, going to ship books out of my backyard. No, I still have an agreement, the publisher, but me being in the driver's seat is much, much different at this point.
That's great. What if, I'm guessing you're glad that you made that decision and went through that process. What have been the biggest benefits of kind of switching, switching out of being in that publishing deal to now having the reins back to the book?
Well, I don't have, wow. Sometimes editors at publishers have to justify their position. I mean, I've had editors, 23 years old, fresh out of college, and to justify their position, they question every line, every comma, every spacing. It's just horrendous to work with. I mean, so certainly I don't have that. I can have my own editors under my direction, and the process is so much smoother. I don't have to lay awake at night thinking, wow, is this going to be, they're going to think chapter 3 ought to be where chapter 6 is now. So I don't have any of that. So the freedom of just moving forward with that is
Yeah.
just amazing. That's the main thing, really. I mean, I've worked with multiple publishers, always had good relationships with them, but your hands are really tied. There's no question
Right.
about it. And as it
For
is
sure.
now, yeah, if I want to, I mean, if I want to put up, if I want to give away copies, I can. If I want to give away digital copies of the book, I can do that. Well, a traditional publisher, that's going to drive them nuts to do that, or give away
Yeah.
the audio. Gee, so we
Yeah.
give away the audio with the purchase of the book. We can do all kinds of mix and match things, creative marketing that a traditional publisher is going to say, no, 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 no.
I like that. What has the book sold less copies, the same, or more, like over a similar time period since you, like if we were saying like maybe a 3 month or 6 month or whatever period before being out of the traditional publishing deal to now? Have you noticed any
Oh,
impact on sales?
I haven't noticed any difference at all. Now, that being said, my focus is not on those books out there. I don't go look at those numbers much.
Yeah. Yeah.
My focus is on using the book as an introduction to what we
Right.
do where we make
Right.
money.
Yeah.
The things that are most important to me is, who can I send this book to for free? Because once exposed to it, then they're a candidate for our high-end coaching programs, our online community, my mastermind. I mean, those are the things that I'm really most interested in. Those are the things that I track. Those are the ones that I personally autograph and put in a box and send out.
Mm.
And as you well know,
Yeah.
I'm not looking to make money on the book. I'm looking to get the book out there so that it introduces people to all the other things we do at 48 days where we do make money.
Yeah. And we're so aligned on that, Dan. I mean, that's same thing when my book published with self-publishing school. It's like that book brings in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in revenue for self-publishing school, but it's through exactly
Yeah,
what you're talking about, which is using the book to get more lead sales and referrals for the business. So
yes.
can you talk to me in a home stretch? Just a couple more questions here. Can you talk to me about how do you choose who to give that book to for free, and what are the numbers that you track in terms of how the book is helping drive the business growth?
Now, what I look in terms of business growth is we have three major areas of revenue in our business. So we've got the one that involves just product sales, seminars and courses and all of that. And then we have our coaching mastery program where we train people to be coaches, because one of the outcomes of the book, and I know I've heard you talk about this, people immediately start asking me, gee, I'm a Christian author too. How can I sell the books like you've done? And I'd answer that, give them all, and after I did that, 30 times, it's like, geez, I need to turn this into an event, a course, which we did. Same thing with coaching. Gee, I see you're pretty successful with coaching. Can you teach me how to do that? Sure. Let me teach you how to do that. So we have that as our second revenue, is our coaching mastery program. And then the third one is our online community. We have online community, 48 Days Eagles. That's really what I'm most excited about. So people in there get everything that I do. So when I come up with a new book, they're the first ones that are going to get that. Now, these are not people who have big audiences, but they're rabid fans. They're sneezers, they're influencers. They talk about it among themselves and among their friends. But then beyond that, I've got a pretty robust list of people who I want to have a copy of whatever it is that I come out with. And they are people who are influencers, people who in their own right have big audiences. And that opens doors. When I came out with this book, right, the new version, the 20th anniversary here, my team was saying, you need to really get out there, do some interviews. And I said, okay, I'll do 48 interviews. I said, I'll do 48 interviews. I don't want to do nothing but interviews, but I said, I'll do 48. So I sent out books with a note to that regard to 50 people. Well, I instantly booked 36 interviews just from doing that. So it's not a matter of going out, knocking on doors. It's a matter of just, again, opening my hand to people that I've had a relationship with over the years. Those people, boom, instantly book. So those are the kind of things that I do. The new book that I'm going to come out with is going to be, it's going to be done, it's going to violate everything we know about books. And again, violate everything that a publisher would want to do with a book. What do publishers want? They want a book that can be done digitally, where we can get the cost down more and more and more, instant delivery and all that. I'm doing a book that's going to be done like this. Now, this is Ryan Holiday's The Daily Stoic, but it's going to be done. It's a compilation of writings that I've been doing every Sunday morning. I get up and write what I call Sabbath Musings. So it's a 700 word, around that area, 700 word, just kind of something to challenge our thinking philosophically and spiritually, just to get us thinking in new ways. I send that out only to my mastermind members. That's it. It was never intended to be a book. But the one that I wrote this last Sunday was number 198. So you do the math times 700, that's a lot of content. And my mastermind members are saying, you have got to get this out to a broader audience. This is too good to be kept just within our own little circle. So it's with their encouragement, their push, that I'm agreeing to doing that. So I'm now putting 90 of those in the first version of this. It's going to be called An Understanding Heart, but it'll be with a simulated leather cover, gold edge pages, bookmark, all those things in there. The publishers say, no, 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 that's too expensive. So now to do that, I mean, yes, I have connections. So it'll be done in China to get the print, but the printing cost is still going to be really reasonable. So I'm going to have a book that's going to cost me about $5 a piece. And instead of trying to sell it for $12 and I'm going to sell for 48. 48 is my brand. I'm going to put it together and sell for 48. I mean, who charges $48 for a book?
Yeah.
But I don't care. See, I'm not trying to beat the list and somehow, have numbers that I can brag about. It's more of a legacy piece. I'm excited about it. I feel good about it. I want it to be something that's seen as, valuable. And again, I'm not, trying to just gouge people. And no, but people who really know and love me will want to have a copy of that. And that's really all I
Absolutely.
care about.
And in a way, it's going back to your roots of a $39 3-ring binder book.
There you go. It
So, hey,
is.
Dan, this has been awesome. 2 final questions. First one being, knowing what you know now, what would your advice be to the Dan of 20 something years ago, pre-book number 1, and all the other Dans out there that are on their way to writing and publishing their first book? Kind of with the wisdom that you have now, what would be your advice to those folks?
Create what I call your 3 a.m. list. Who could you call at 3 a.m. if you really needed help? Now, my 3 a.m. list, I actually had a caveat on that. If I really was in a jam and I needed $10,000, now it's not just to, have rich friends, but I just put something in there. You could make it whatever you want. But who could you call who would not just say, hey, I really care about you. Yeah, I'll pray about you. But somebody who'd get in their car and come see you or somehow really tangibly help you. Who's on that list? So I've got a significant number on that list. Who's on your list? If you have a list that is extensive, you're going to be successful if you decide to write a book. If you don't have anybody on that list, start working on building significant, nurtured, important relationships. That you've got to have that. You can't get into this just as some outside feeder for content. Content's easy to get. People buy a book because they believe in you. So you have to build credibility. When you sell something, there has to be rapport and trust before they're going to pull out their money and pay you. So how are you going to build your trust? Now, what I recommend, incidentally, on that, Chandler, is that you have a list that corresponds at least to your age. So if you're 27 years old, you got to have 27 people on there. If you're 50, you got to have 50 on there. And I think that's a reasonable goal so that you expect as you grow and mature, you're going to increase that. But get people on that list, people that you really believe would have that kind of response to you. That's going to be the foundation for then writing a book that people care about.
That's awesome. So good. I love that. Dan, this has been amazing, man. I appreciate you. Where can people go to find out more about you and to check out, to buy your book, to check out what you're up to, your business and all those things?
The easiest place, we created a unique landing page for you and your listeners. If they go to 48days.com/SPS, Self-Publishing School, SPS, 48days.com/SPS, you get a free chapter of this new version of 48 Days to the Work You Love, and also link to some of the other resources that we've kind of alluded to here to get started. Thank you for that.
Awesome. So guys, it's the number 48days.com/SPS, stands for Self-Publishing School. And you can get some free resources. Thank you, Dan, for creating that link and hooking up the crew with some great resources.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much.
Thanks for the honor. I love talking about this stuff, Chandler.
Yes, sir.